Alright, right before I begin this audiobook, I do want to say that there's a lot of Chinese that I have to pronounce here, and, I'm gonna do it poorly. On top of the issue that the pinging that is in the article is kind of out of date and kind of really difficult for me to parse, I'm also just not very good at pronouncing Chinese. So, yeah, this is as good as I can do it, and hopefully you enjoy the audiobook.
Wither China by Sheng Lien.
When the struggle to hit back at the February adverse current reached July, August, and September, the people of the whole country had a sense of vigorous growth, believing that there was hope of a great proletarian cultural revolution being carried to the end, and that all the traditional ideas that feathered the mind of the people would be cast aside. However, an adverse current of counter-revolutionary reformism appeared after October at the higher upper levels and descended below. An atmosphere of class compromise, calling for an end to the first cultural revolution, suddenly grew in intensity. Again, the people of the whole country were bewildered, young intellectuals and students in particular, being extra sensitive, were the first to feel it. Again, questions were asked. What shall we do in Wither China? The establishment of the ultra-left faction commune was first of all for the sake of answering this question. To correctly answer this question, it is necessary to earnestly sum up the very rich experience and lessons created by the greatest revolution in history in 1967, principally the experience of the great historical significance created by the January storm and the August partial domestic revolutionary war. 1. Scientific foresight. Contemporary China is a focus of world contradictions and the center of the storm for a world revolution. Where is China going to? On this highly important question, Comrade Mao Zedong, the great teacher of the world proletariat, has apparently only made an abstract prediction. Just before the world-shaking great proletarian cultural revolution was to rise from the east with the force of the thunderbolt, Chairman Mao announced to the whole world, with the magnificent heart of the proletariat, that the first Marxist-Leninist big character poster of the country is the manifesto of the Peking People's Commune of the 1960s. It was these words that announced the official beginning of the vehement development among the masses of the great proletarian cultural revolution. These words also showed that Chairman Mao brilliantly and ingeniously foresaw the appearance of a brand new situation in our state military, namely political organs of the Paris Commune type. In the January Revolution, Chairman Mao again proposed the name of People's Commune of China. That meant that as an ultimate result of the first great cultural revolution, China would advance in the direction of the People's Commune of China. However, as the development developed at this time only at a local level, historical limitations enabled almost no one to understand the ultimate object of the first cultural revolution as pointed out by Chairman Mao. People regarded these words of Chairman Mao as words of general praise and have gradually forgotten them. Even before the Cultural Revolution officially began, Chairman Mao had already sketched out the content of the new political structure, People's Commune of China, in his famous May 7th Directive. But people in general regarded that sketch in the May 7th Directive as an idealistic communist utopia. People think it impractical to make the May 7th Directive the target of our short-range struggle at present. Only some intellectual youths will keep reciting the May 7th Directive and declare loudly that they would fight for its realization in the May 7th Directive, because they realize that only the new society sketched in the May 7th Directive, which is different from the existing society, is a society in which they may have a liberation. But even among intellectual youths, there are many who think it impractical to realize the kind of society envisaged in the May 7th Directive in the not-too-distant future. It is truer to say that their energetic propaganda about the May 7th Directive is a self-consolation for their dissatisfaction with reality than that they are fighting with full confidence for the realization of the May 7th Directive. Chairman Mao's scientific prediction leaves in the people's mind a utopian impression. This is in accord with the fact that the class struggle has not yet developed to an acute and high stage.
The development of new productive forces in China today has brought in conflict the class that represents new productive forces and the decaying class that represents the productive relations, which impede the progress of history. It will inevitably lead to a great social revolution, and a new society will inevitably be born amid the fierce flames.
This objective law is a solid basis for Chairman Mao's scientific, not utopian, prediction. As people have not yet known this law, the scientific prediction naturally leaves people with the impression of a purely utopian dream about the beautiful future.
People believe that China will pass peacefully into the society depicted in the May 7th directive. But what happens in reality? Peaceful transition is only another name for peaceful evolution. It can only cause China to drift further and further away from the commune depicted in the May 7th directive, and nearer to the existing society of the Soviet Union.
What Chairman Mao puts forward, i.e., the revolution in which one class overthrows another, or a great alliance of proletarian revolutionaries to seize power from the capitalist rulers, solves the question of practical transition towards the commune.
The rule of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie must be overthrown by force in order to solve the problem of political power. Empty shouting about the realization of the May 7th directive, without any reference to power seizure and utter smashing of the old state machinery, will of course be a utopian dream.
2. Storm of January Revolution.
Lenin once made this famous remark, quote, "All revolutions, provided they are real revolutions, are, in the final analysis, changes of classes. Therefore, the best means of increasing the awareness of the masses and exposing the deception of the masses with revolutionary vows is the analysis of class changes that have taken place or are taking place in these revolutions." End quote. Let us analyze the class changes that resulted from the January Revolution in accordance with the teaching so as to expose the deception of the masses with revolutionary vows.
As everybody knows, the greatest fact from the January Revolution is that 90% of the senior cadres were able to stand aside. In Hunan, Chiang Ping-hua, Chuang Po-sun, Hua Kuo-feng, and the like had their power reduced to zero. At the center, power seizure was made in the Ministry of Finance, Broadcasting Affairs Administration Bureau, and other departments, and the power of Li Lien, Chen Yi, Tan Chen Lin, and the like, as well as Zhou Enlai, who represented them, also fell greatly. To whose hands did these assets go at the time? They went to the hands of the people, who were full of boundless enthusiasm and were organized to take over the urban administrations and the party, government, financial, and cultural powers of the industrial, commercial, communications, and other systems. What the editors called for, i.e., that the masses should rise and take control of the destiny of the socialist country, and to manage the city's industry, communications, and economy, was truly realized. The storm of the January Revolution suddenly turned all this from the hands of the bureaucrats into the hands of the enthusiastic working class. People suddenly found that without the bureaucrats, they could not go on living, but could live better and develop quickly with greater freedom. The bureaucrats had tried to intimidate the workers before the revolution, saying, "Without us, production would collapse and the whole society would be in a state of chaos." But the fact was not like that. As a matter of fact, without the bureaucrats and bureaucratic organs, productivity was greatly liberated. After the Ministry of the Coal Industry collapsed, production of coal went as usual. The Ministry of Railways collapsed, but transportation was carried on as usual. All departments of the Provincial Party Committee collapsed, but work went on as usual. Moreover, the enthusiasm of the working class for production and its activism were greatly liberated. The management of industrial plants by the workers themselves after January was really moving. For the first time, the workers felt that it was not the state which managed them, but they who managed the state. For the first time, they felt that they were producing for themselves. Their enthusiasm was never so high, and their sense of responsibility as masters of the house was never so strong. Changsha Weaving and Spinning Mill and other factories also created rebel classes and numerous other new things. That was the true content of the class changes in the January Revolution. In that short period, some places actually realized, though not very thoroughly, the content of the People's Commune of China, and the society was in a state of mass dictatorship similar to that of the Paris Commune. The storm of the January Revolution told people that China would head for a society free from bureaucrats, and that 90% of the high-ranking cadres at the time had formed a special class. The objective law of the development of class struggle caused most of them to stand aside in January. The fact that 90% of the senior cadres had to stand aside in the storm of the January Revolution was certainly not the fault of the masses. The masses are the real heroes. Those of the senior cadres who had perpetrated the most crimes were duly punished. Only in a very few cases was the punishment incommensurate with the crime.
Facts as revealed by the masses and their wrath told the people initially that this class of red capitalists had completely become a decaying class that hindered the progress of history, and that the relations between them and the people in general had changed from relations between leaders and the led to those between rulers and the ruled, the exploiters and the exploited, from the relations of revolutionaries of equal standing to those between the oppressed and the oppressors. The special privileges and high salaries of the class of red capitalists was built on the basis of the oppression and exploitation of the broad masses of the people. In order to realize the People's Commune of China, it was necessary to overthrow this class.
The storm of the January Revolution was a great attempt by the revolutionary people, led by Chairman Mao, to topple the old world and build a new world. A program for the first great proletarian political revolution was formulated at that great moment. Chairman Mao pointed out, "This is one class overthrowing another. It is a great revolution." That shows that the Cultural Revolution is not a revolution to dismiss officials from office or a dragging out movement, nor is it a purely cultural revolution, but a revolution in which one class overthrows another. Seen from the facts of the storm of the January Revolution, the overthrown class is none other than the class of bureaucrats formed in China in the past 17 years.
In the struggle to seize power in these units, the Marxist principles of smashing the old state machinery must be observed. Here, there is no room for reformism, combining two into one, or peaceful transition. Quote, "The old state machinery must be smashed utterly. The old system of exploitation, revisionist system, and bureaucratic organs must be utterly smashed." End quote. The program of the first great proletarian political revolution was put forward in the editorials and in an embryonic, not very concrete state in the final stages of the storm of the January Revolution. The decaying class that should be overthrown, the old state machinery that should be smashed, and even social problems, on which people formerly had not dared to express a dissonant view, were put forward. This great development was an inevitable result of the courage and pioneering spirit demonstrated by the proletariat in the storm of the January Revolution. Problems of system, policy, and guideline touched upon in the January Revolution were mainly those connected with the capitalist labor employment systems of contract workers and casual workers, as well as the revisionist movement of going to the hilly and rural areas. At present, the ultra-left must organize personnel to sum up and study properly the multitude of things created during the storm of the January Revolution. These new things are the embryonic form of a Paris Commune-style new society. 3. Revolutionary Committees. Why did Comrade Mao Zedong, who energetically advocated the Commune, suddenly oppose the establishment of the Shanghai People's Commune in January? This is something which the revolutionary people find hard to understand. Comrade Mao, who foresaw the Commune as a political structure which must be realized in the First Cultural Revolution, suddenly put forward, "Revolutionary committees are fine. Revolution must progress along a zigzagging way. It must go through a prolonged course of struggle, failure, again struggle, again till final victory. Why can't communes be established immediately?" This is the first time the revolutionary people have tried to overthrow a powerful enemy. How shallow their knowledge of this revolution was. They not only failed to realize voluntarily the necessity of thoroughly smashing the old state machinery and overhauling some of the social systems, but did not see clearly that the enemy formed a class, and the revolutionary ranks were dominated by ideas of revolution to dismiss officials and revolution to drag them out. The development of the wisdom of the masses had not yet attained the degree at which it would be possible to reform society. As a result, the fruit of revolution was in the final analysis taken by the capitalist class. Any revolution must necessarily involve the army. Since a red capitalist class already formed in China, the army, of course, cannot detach itself from this reality. Yet the January storm has not touched in any way the vital problem of all revolutions, the problem of the army. Thus, it must be seen that the revolution lacked depth and remained in the low stage of development. The degree of maturity of the political thought of the revolutionary people, too, was in conformity with this low-level revolution. It, too, remained at a very immature stage.
At a time when other victory is impossible, to try and win real victory will be left adventurism. In accordance with the necessity of the seizure of the fruit of revolution by the capitalist class, the correct strategic policy, now called strategic plan, is to enable the people to forge their political and ideological weapon in the struggle at a higher stage, and, through the oncoming and ebbing tides of revolution, to prepare strength for winning the final victory. Otherwise, if communes are established while the masses have not yet really realized that their interest lies in the realization of the communes in China, the communes will be communes in name only, while in reality they will be sham communes, essentially the same as the present revolutionary communes with powers usurped by the bourgeoisie. Therefore, Comrade Mao Zedong, the great supreme leader of the proletariat, did not hesitate in the least to go against the dream cherished by infantile revolutionaries of immediate establishment of communes, adopted a correct strategic policy, i.e. strategic plan, and at the same time called upon the armed forces to support the left. Support the left is in fact Chairman Mao's ingenious means of carrying out the Cultural Revolution in the armed forces, to prevent the damage to be caused by sabotage and resistance by the capitalist roaders in the army against the proletariat, which was bound to take place if the four big was directly unfolded in the armed forces. He called upon the army to support the left. On the surface, four big is carried out in the armed forces, but in practice they are made to take part in the thundering local cultural revolution of four big. It is education for the armed forces and cultural revolution for the army rather than support for the left. Meanwhile, revolutionary committees are gradually established in all parts of the country. The 3-in-1 combination is the concrete content of the revolutionary committees.
The putting forward of a 3-in-1 combination amounts to a reinstatement of the bureaucrats already toppled in the January Revolution. Inevitably, it will be the form of political power to be usurped by the bourgeoisie, at which the army and local bureaucrats are to play a leading role.
Chairman Mao, too, calls the Revolutionary Committee of 3-in-1 combination a provisional organ of power. It is only a transitional form and not the ultimate product of the First Cultural Revolution. The ultimate product of the First Cultural Revolution is the Commune, and not the Revolutionary Committee. Chairman Mao's summing up in the August-September of the January Revolution and the August Revolutionary War in the country, in his great theory of mass dictatorship formulated from the summing up, proves that after the First Cultural Revolution it will be a mass dictatorship, not a 3-in-1 dictatorship of bureaucrats with the masses in a supporting role. However, the aforementioned transitional form is necessary. Denial of the transitional form will be leftist empty talk. 4. February adverse current.
The force and intensity of the January Revolution caused the bureaucrats to carry out a hurried usurpation of power.
Unlike their usual selves, they adopted the most urgent and savage means of suppression. This proves negatively the intensity of the redistribution of assets and power in the January Revolution as a result of the stepping aside of 90% of the senior cadres. The tragic consequences of the February adverse current also proves the correctness of Mao Zedong's prediction that there can be no immediate victory.
The red capitalist class gained an almost overwhelming ascendancy in February and March. The assets, means of production and power, were seized from the revolutionary people and returned to the bureaucrats. In February, Leng Shuqian, Liu Zuyuan, Chang Po-sen, Hua Kuofeng. Again, sorry for the shitty Chinese, I have no idea what intonation these are meant to be pronounced in. And bureaucrats all over the country and their agents at the center wielded unlimited power. It was their heyday, while the power of the revolutionary people dropped to zero. Moreover, large numbers of them were thrown into prison under the control of the bourgeois state machinery. Intoxicated by the victory of February-March, Zhou Enlai, at present the general representative of China's red capitalist class, hurriedly tried to set up revolutionary committees in all parts of the country. If this bourgeois plan had been fulfilled, the proletariat would have retreated to its grave. Therefore, Without waiting for the establishment of the revolutionary committees, the Central Cultural Revolutionary Group issued the order to hit back. After that, the Great August Local Revolutionary War in the country began to ferment. In this struggle to hit back at the February adverse current, the important sign of the revolutionaries' entry into a higher stage was that the problem of the army really began to make itself felt. The revolutionary people had very childish ideas about the army during the January Revolution, believing that as soon as the local capitalist rulers were overthrown, the armed forces would unite with the revolutionary people to suppress the capitalist rulers in accordance with Chairman Mao's order of union from the upper to lower levels. This sanguinary fact of the February adverse current told the people that the upper to lower order alone could not bring the implementation of Chairman Mao's intentions in the armed forces, because unanimity of the interests of the capitalist rulers in the army and those of the local capitalist rulers would prevent the army from carrying out Chairman Mao's revolutionary line. It was necessary to carry out the cultural revolution from the lower level upward in the army, and to rely on the people's revolution, the locomotive of progress in history, in order to change the state of opposition between the military and the civilian population brought about by the control of the army by the bureaucrats.
The struggle since February has placed the grave problem of the army before the broad masses, formerly only before Chairman Mao and a small minority. This gradually provides the condition for solution of the problem through the strength of the broad masses of the people. It is scientifically foreseen that military strength in the new society of communes will be different from that of the present-day army. The struggle since February has enabled this idea of Chairman Mao to gradually grasp the masses. 5. Local Domestic Revolutionary War of August. There have been innumerable writings about the army since the end of January. The nationwide large-scale armed struggle that took place in the past and in the beginning of the new stage was with the local wars in Szechuan and other areas. Add the color of war and the armed seizure of power to writings about the army. This is a gladdening phenomenon of gradual maturity of the political idea of thorough social reform by the proletariat.
Due to the historical limitations of the time, many of the writings about the army are very immature and have great shortcomings. But many of these writings are new things. They will be proved by history to be significant things. How well Engels spoke when he commented upon utopian socialism. Quote, "Let the peddlers of the circle of authors solemnly find fault with the imaginations which at present can only make people laugh. Let them gratify themselves with the thought that their strict way of thinking is superior to such mad ideas. What makes us glad is that gifted ideological buds and gifted ideas that show themselves everywhere by breaking through the outer shell of imagination. These things the mediocre people cannot see." End quote. There are two essential points in the writing about the army. It is now seen that the army now is different from the people's army before the liberation. Before the liberation, the army and the people fought together to overthrow imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, and feudalism. The relationship between the army and the people was like that between fish and water. After the liberation, the target of the revolution has changed from imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, and feudalism to capitalist rulers. And these capitalist rulers are power holders in the army. Some of the armed forces in the revolution have not only changed their blood and flesh relations with the people that they obtained before the liberation, but have even become tools for suppressing revolution. Therefore, if the first great proletarian cultural revolution is to succeed, a radical change in the army will be necessary. The ultra-left faction has found its basis for its thinking in the quotation from Chairman Mao. In the same year after Chairman Mao issued the order for the armed forces to live in the barracks, they are separated from the masses. It is now seen that a revolutionary war in the country is necessary if the revolutionary people want to overcome the armed red capitalist class.
The large-scale armed struggle between the proletariat and the red capitalist class in August and the local revolutionary war in the country bore out the rebel faction's prediction. The experience created by the local revolutionary wars in August is moreover unparalleled in history and rich and great. Contrary to the expectations of the mediocrities in general, history advanced in the direction predicted by the heretics and evil advocates. Hitherto unimaginable, large-scale gun-seizing incidents occurred regularly in accordance with the pace of historical development. Local wars in the country of varying magnitude in which the army took a direct part In Jiangxi and Hangzhou, the armed forces were directly involved in the fighting, erupted. The creative spirit and revolutionary fervor displayed by the people in August was very moving. Gun seizing became a movement. Its magnitude and the violence of the Revolutionary Wars gave the people a deep impression at the time. The people, and the people alone, are the motive force of the creation of world history. For a short time, the cities in a state of armed mass dictatorship, the power of most of the industries, commerce, communications, and urban administration were taken away from Chuang Po-sun, Hua Guofeng, Wang Shuqin, Liu Ziyuan, and the like, and put into the hands of the armed revolutionary people. Never before had the revolutionary people appeared on the stage of history in the role of masters of world history, as they did in August. The heroic image of the primary school pupils who volunteered to work as traffic police and directed traffic, and the pride with which Sheng, Chuang Fei, Feng Lei, Huang Cheng Hui, and other mass organizations directly exercised some of the financial economic powers, left an unforgettable impression. August was the month when the power of revolutionary mass organizations rapidly grew, while those of the bureaucrats again dropped to zero. A short-lived and unstable redistribution of assets and power took place for a second time. Once more, society tried to realize the great People's Commune of China. Once more, people tried to solve the problem raised in the May 7th Directive. Namely, the army should be a big school, and workers, peasants, and students should all learn military art. This attempt had not been made in the January Revolution. Even before liberation, the army was already a big school which maintained excellent relations with the masses and which combined the roles of soldiers, students, civilians, peasants, and workers. This was summed up by Chairman Mao just before the victory of the Democratic Revolution. But why, after more than 10 years of liberation, the question of improving army-civilian relations and the army should be a big school is again raised? As has been said in the preceding paragraph, this is because after the liberation, the army has undergone changes and is separated from the masses to a greater or lesser degree. As a result, this question is again put on the agenda. The great pioneering act of the Storm of August was the appearance of an armed force organized by the revolutionary people themselves. This force comes to be an actual force of the proletarian dictatorship, or dictatorship over the capitalist roaders. The force and the people in accord and fight together to overthrow the red capitalist class. The people, instead of lamenting this fall of military region command, a bureaucratic organ, rejoice at it. Yet formerly, they used to think that they could not go without it. This fact has enabled the proletariat to foresee more realistically the direction in which China's army advances and envisages the armed strength of the new society, the People's Commune of China. It may be said with certainty that China will be a society in which the army and the people are identical and united as one, and in which the army will have shaken off the control of the bureaucrats. If we say the January storm produced a program for the first great proletarian political revolution, then the August storm has not only enriched the program, but also solved the method of revolution, relying not only on the four big, but on the armed seizure and internal revolutionary war. 6. The setback in September. While people were rejoicing and advancing with great impetus, and loudly and unceasingly talking about a thorough victory, the great teacher of the proletariat saw a new danger on the horizon.
Let us look at the content of the new danger. On the one hand, owing to the nakedness of the February suppression of rebellion, even the red capitalist class keenly sensed the inevitability of its own defeat. After May, China's red capitalists changed their tactics. In many places, there appeared a trend of cadres making appearances. One after another, red capitalists like Sungjin Qiang of the northeast and Cheng Po-sun of Hunan, blood-sucking vampires who used to ride on the backs of the people, suddenly displayed fervor for the slaves' revolutionary struggles. Individually, the declared support for the revolutionary masses in the bombardment of the military region or district commands. At the same time, the revolutionary people have not yet tried to overthrow the capitalist roaders as a class, and as the proletariat and the broad mass of the revolutionary people were still under the influence of the doctrine of revolution through dragging out people, and revolution through dismissal of officials. People believed that the purpose of the Cultural Revolution was the purging of individual capitalist roaders, and that it was proper to use some of the revolutionary leading cadres, who were also bureaucrats, for hitting other bureaucrats. As a result, the tactic of big and small Chung Po Suns easily deceived the people. This determined the objective inevitability of the usurpation of the fruit of victory of the August storm by the bourgeoisie.
Meanwhile, owing to the hurried suppression by the bourgeoisie and the proletariat's speedy hitting back after February, dictatorship by the Revolutionary Committee, a power organ during the transition to the Commune, had not yet begun. There was no period of transition in which the red capitalists could fraudulently win the trust of the people and suppress the people. The people, therefore, could not learn from sanguinary facts that the capitalist roaders were a class and did not accept the program of the First Cultural Revolution, a revolution in which one class overthrew another. Thorough social revolution would be impossible. On the other hand, to realize this demand of the May 7th directive for changes in the army, it was necessary to carry out the Cultural Revolution in the field armies through to the end. It was also necessary to let the field armies support the left. In fact, in carrying out the great proletarian cultural revolution in the field armies, it was leftist blind action to demand immediate victory before an all-out support the left movement was developed in the field armies. There was also the question of the great proletarian cultural revolution in rural areas. If there is no revolutionary storm in the rural areas, then no power seizure of any kind could really represent the interests of the people, or the peasants. The May 7th directive called for factories opening up and operating farms in rural villages setting up and operating factories. It implied that in the new commune, the differences between industry and farming, between urban and rural areas, would be much smaller than they were at present. The reduction of the gap should be brought about by launching a peasant movement, a locomotive of historical progress of the revolutionary people guided by the thought of Mao Zedong. To demand thorough victory of the first great proletarian cultural revolution before a peasant movement was launched would be empty talk. While thorough victory was practically impossible, the task of Marxist-Leninists was to show completely the falsity of the cry, thorough victory. If the Marxist-Leninists had power in their hand, they should exercise it in banning the cry, immediate overthrow of the revolutionary committees and the establishment of the Commune, and any agitation for this purpose, so that the splendid name of Commune might not be tainted by false practice. Meanwhile, the capitalist bureaucrat class in the party and the army began to carry out sabotage against the Central Cultural Revolution group in August and September. They deliberately created confusion in the army and caused stagnation in the economy and other sectors. A senior army cadre openly and arrogantly assailed the Central Cultural Revolution group, and that was their general policy in August-September. Does the Central Cultural Revolution group still want the PLA? If it doesn't, then it will go pack up and go home. And the Cultural Revolution group has shifted the Revolutionary Army cadres so that they are separated from their wives and children, their homes broken up, and their kin lost. In view of the series of developments, where the proletariat has already made great gains and has ample room for retreat without having to retreat to its grave, when it is still possible to win thorough victory immediately and to consolidate the gains already made, and to appease the bourgeoisie so that they may not leap over the wall like desperate dogs, the wise Supreme Commander Mao Zedong once again made a big retreat after September, in disregard of demands by impatient revolutionaries for victory.
A political situation of bourgeois usurpation of power came about with the establishment of revolutionary committees or preparatory groups for revolutionary committees. The extent of this retreat was unprecedented. The unlimited relaxation of the cadre policy after September was in fact an extensive concession to the capitalist roaders, who were allowed to mount the stage again. An outstanding example was the treatment accorded to Chen Cai-to. The chairman went so far as to say that Chen studied very well and could come back to work again.
But because the revolutionary forces of the proletariat have been greatly strengthened, the retreat has not ended in a rout, as the retreat in February had. The bourgeoisie cannot come near to swallowing the revolution as they did in March.
The revolutionary forces of Hunan, which barred the Zhou-enlai, were not annihilated. Instead, they have formed Sheng Lien and have made progress in certain respects. To seize the fruit of victory won by the proletariat in August and to turn the mass dictatorship again into bureaucratic rule, the bourgeois in the revolutionary committees must first disarm the working class. The guns in the hands of the workers have boundlessly increased the power of the working class. This fact is a mortal threat to the bourgeoisie, who is afraid of it. Out of spontaneous hatred for the bureaucrats who tried to snatch the fruit of victory, the revolutionary people shouted a resounding revolutionary slogan: "Surrender of arms amounts to suicide." They formed spontaneous nationwide mass arms concealment movement for the armed overthrow of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie. The arms-grabbing movement of August was great. It was not only unprecedented in capitalist countries. Moreover, it accomplished the fact of turning the whole nation into soldiers for the first time in socialist countries. Before the Cultural Revolution, the bureaucrats dared not really hand over the arms to the people. The militia was only a facade behind which the bureaucrats control the armed strength of the people. It is certainly not an armed force of the working class, but a docile tool in the hands of the bureaucrats. In the arms-seizing movement, the masses, instead of receiving arms like favors from above, for the first time seized arms from the hands of the bureaucrats by relying on the brute force of the revolutionary people themselves. For the first time, the workers have had their own arms. Chairman Mao's rising call, "Arm the left," was an intensive concentration of the courage of the working class. But the September 5th order completely nullified the call to arm the left. The working class was disarmed. The bureaucrats again came back to power.
7. Enlightenment of political thinking of the working class.
The July 1st editorial, 1967, raised the question of party building. During the violent class struggle in July and August, a very small number of ultra-leftists put forward the demand that the ultra-lefts should have their own political party. To make revolution, it is necessary to have a revolutionary party. Since the past few months, the class struggle has entered a higher stage. What sort of stage is it? In this stage, the revolutionary people have already accumulated the rich experience of redistribution of assets and power twice, the January Revolution and August Revolution. This experience is the program of the First Cultural Revolution, produced by the January Revolution for the Great Revolution in China, in which one class should overthrow another. It is to overthrow the newborn bourgeoisie and establish the People's Commune in China, a new society free from bureaucrats like the Paris Commune.
There is also a method, suggested in the August Storm, of gradually bringing about revolutionary changes in the army and armed seizure of power.
The reverse and higher stage struggle after September also tell the revolutionary people why neither the January Revolution nor the August Revolution ended in thorough victory. Why, after such a prolonged struggle, the fruit of victory of revolution was taken away by bourgeois bureaucrats. Why the old order was restored everywhere. Why the bourgeoisie was able to recapture the assets and power which they had lost in August, and why the courage and pioneering spirit displayed by the proletariat in the January Revolution and the August Storm was almost completely extinguished and submerged. The appearance of a large-scale adverse current tells people that all illusions about bourgeois bureaucrats and distrust in the people's own strength must be thoroughly abandoned, and that the revolution of one class overthrowing another must be prosecuted. However, the Revolutionary Committee is a product of the revolution of dismissal of officials. In Hunan, Chiang Ping-hua and Liu Tzu-yun were dismissed from office, but this did not remove the acute antagonism between the new bourgeoisie and the masses of the people. Instead, the acute antagonism between the preparatory group for the revolutionary committees and the people, as represented by Lien, is present in a new situation. A new bourgeois reactionary line and a new adverse current of capitalist restoration have again appeared. But a thoroughly stable distribution of assets and power has not been realized. The revolution by dismissal of officials is only bourgeois reformism, which changes in a zigzagging way the new bureaucratic bourgeois rule before the Cultural Revolution into another kind of bourgeois rule of bourgeois bureaucrats and representatives from several supporting mass organizations. The Revolutionary Committee is a product of bourgeois reformism. Problems cannot be solved by merely dismissing several officials from office. Bourgeois reformism proves futile. The result of reformism, the Revolutionary Committee, again brings about new bourgeois dictatorship, which arouses even more violent opposition from the people.
Heilongjiang, Shantung, Shanghai, Guizhou, Hunan, and other places where revolutionary committees or preparatory groups for such committees have been established and have proved or are proving that China cannot move in the direction of bourgeois reformism through revolutionary committees because that means capitalist restoration. China can only go in the socialist direction of thorough revolution of the People's Commune of China as proclaimed by the People's Commune of Peking of the 1960s.
The people should be made to understand the truth, and should make the resolution act instead of our making the resolution for them. He is not a thorough materialist who ignores the role of the teacher by negative example, because the various incidents and changes in the struggle against capital cannot but make people realize, and more in the defeat than in victory, that the panaceas so dear to them are completely useless. The defeat also enables them to understand more profoundly the true conditions for the liberation of the working class. Revolutions often take various reformist unthorough roads. It is only when the panaceas are proved useless that the revolutionary people would resolve to follow the most painful and most destructive, but also the most thorough and revolutionary road. The struggle in the transition period of the revolutionary committees will inevitably disillusion the masses about the panacea of bourgeois reformism, which they love so much. Chairman Mao says, quote, Buddhist idols are set up by the peasants. When the time comes, the peasants will throw away these idols with their own hands. There is no need for others to do it too soon. End quote. In the not far distant future, the revolutionary people will surely smash to pieces with their own iron hands the newborn red political power which they have secured with their own blood and lives.
The stage of struggle since September has been teaching the people about the newborn stage in this respect.
As a result of the practice of struggle, having gained rich experience and entered the higher stage, the maturity of the political thinking of the revolutionary people of China has also entered the higher stage. A new trend of thought, called ultra-left trend of thought, by the enemy, include overthrow of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie, abolition of bureaucratic organs, thorough smashing of the state machine, etc., wanders among the revolutionary people like a specter in the eyes of the enemy. The weapon of political thinking, which the revolutionary masses are to win utter victory in the proletarian socialist Great Revolution, has begun to appear in a new form in the ultra-left faction. The thought of Mao Zedong, which is carrying out a new social revolution in China, will gradually wake up the masses from all contradictions of the past. The revolutionary people are beginning to understand gradually in practice why revolution is necessary, who are to be liquidated in the revolution, and how the revolution is to be carried out. Revolutionary struggle begins to change from the stage of spontaneity to that of consciousness, from necessity to freedom.
In the higher stage of the struggle since September, a higher stage of the fiery intellectual youth has also appeared, as well as a new struggle by contract workers and casual workers. This plays a great promotive role so far as the muddled thinking in the stage of enlightenment is concerned. It absorbs the spontaneous, strong demands on Marxist-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought from the segments of the determined revolutionary forces and for a profound understanding of social contradictions in China. It also remedies the shortcomings of the extreme lack of understanding of social contradictions and separation from reality of the new trend of thought among young intellectuals and students. When the revolutionary people enter from blindness into the stage of enlightenment of political thinking, when the formation of the doctrine of Mao Zedong into an independent positive political trend of thought and political force among the masses begins gradually to become a reality, the organization and establishment of basic level organizations of the Chinese Communist Party, a political party of the doctrine of Mao Zedong, is put on the agenda by Comrade Mao Zedong. The revolutionary leader of the proletariat, Comrade Mao Zedong, puts forward the principle of rebuilding the party and reorganizing the class ranks under new historical conditions, i.e., the party organization should be formed of advanced elements of the proletariat. It should be a youthful, and vigorous vanguard organization capable of leading the proletariat and the revolutionary masses in a fight against the class enemy. The putting forward of the principle for the building of a revolutionary political party, the Mao Zedong Doctrine Party, or Chinese Communist Party, that will lead the people to overthrow today's class enemy, the new red bourgeoisie, shows that in order to fulfill the first true proletarian socialist revolution and to build in China the commune as delineated in the May 7th Directive, the existing Communist Party of China must undergo revolutionary changes.
The 9th National Congress of the party, about to be convened, is not expected to be able to thoroughly settle the question of where the Chinese Communist Party is going. The political party that is produced in accordance with the provisions promulgated by the Center for Rehabilitation, Regulation, and Rebuilding of the party, if such a party can be formed, will necessarily be a party of bourgeois reformism that serves the bourgeois usurpers in the revolutionary committees. The convention of the 9th Congress will only be a reflection of the transition period of local revolutionary committees in the center. That decides that the 9th Congress will not be able to thoroughly settle the question of where China is going, the core of which, where the Chinese Communist Party is going to, and where the Chinese PLA is going to. When a truly stable victory gradually becomes possible, the following several questions will take prominent position. The unevenness of the revolution will assume a prominent position. The possibility of winning true, thorough victory in one or several provinces first, overthrowing the project of bourgeois reformism, the rule of the revolutionary committees, and re-establishing a political power of the Paris Commune type, becomes a crucial question as to whether the revolution can develop in depth at high speed. Unlike the preceding stage of blind, spontaneous development, here unevenness of the revolution no longer plays an immaterial role. To really overthrow the rule of the new aristocracy and thoroughly smash the old state machinery, it will be necessary to go into the question of assessment of the past 17 years. This is also a major problem of teaching the people fundamentally why it is necessary to carry out the great cultural revolution, and what the ultimate object of that revolution is. To really make the revolution victorious, it will be necessary to settle the question of primary importance to the revolution. Who are our enemies, and who are our friends? And to make a new class analysis of China's society, where a new situation has arisen as a result of great class changes, and so as to reorganize the class ranks, rally our friends, and hit other enemies.
This series of new questions is raised by Comrade Sheng in their speech in November 12, 1967. This speech of Comrade Sheng announced the beginning of a new stage, unparalleled in history, in which the great proletarian cultural revolution had entered. This important speech dealt with the literary and art circles alone. But the literary and art revolution is a harbinger of political revolution, and the prosperity of China's literary and art circles and their fiery struggle is the direction which China's revolutions will take. Comrade Sheng's speech tells us practically that so far as revolution, no matter what it took the form of work teams criticizing and repudiating the reactionary line or hitting back at the February adverse current, has basically dealt with only the problems of the Cultural Revolution and the problems of the 50 days that shielded the past 17 years, and has only touched the charm that protects the bourgeoisie.
The real revolution, the revolution to negate the past 17 years, has basically not yet begun, and that we should now enter the stage of tackling the fundamental questions of China's revolution.
Comrade Sheng's directive, in which she raised the question of unevenness of revolution, the relationship between the past 17 years and the 50 days, and the reorganization of the class ranks, the vanguard of which is the Revolutionary Political Party, and Vice Chairman Lin's October 24th directive has concretely indicated where China should go and where Hunan should go. China must go in the direction of carrying the first true socialist revolution through to the end, and must not follow the direction of putting a stop to it and restoring capitalism. Comrade Chi Peng-yu said Comrade Sheng's speeches of November 9th and November 12th have summed up the experience of the Great Cultural Revolution of the past year, greatly promoted the development of the Great Cultural Revolution, and produced great influence in the whole country. This, in effect, shows that the Great November 12th speech and October 24th directive form only a general guideline for our revolutionary struggle in 1968. We shall separately deal with, in detail, the three problems mentioned in Comrade Sheng's Great November 12th speech. The third of the three problems includes the problem of reformation of the Chinese Communist Party.
The 24th directive amounts to the declaration that Hunan is a vanguard area of revolutionary struggle of the whole country. Thus, the genesis and development of Hunan's Sheng Lien is an outstanding representative of the growth and strength of the proletariat since September. Sheng Lien was in fact born by the experience of the people-run civil office and Armed Defense Command Headquarters, a form of mass dictatorship of the January Revolution. It is a power organ of mass dictatorship of a higher order than those of January and August. It must be compared to the Soviet of the February Revolution in the USSR, when power was usurped by the bourgeoisie, or the preparatory groups for the Provincial Revolutionary Committee. Sheng is comparable to the bourgeois provisional government at that time. The opposition between Lien and Sheng is a new situation in which power organs of the two systems coexist, but in practice, power is in the hands of Sheng the bourgeois provisional government. Lien is a newborn sprout comparable to the Soviets. It is an embryonic form of a more mature commune than that of January and August. No matter how the bourgeoisie alternately employ suppression in the reformist tactic of encouraging the activities of the third force, Lien, as a true newborn of red political power, will surely grow and gather strength continuously amid big gales and storms.
8. Refutation of the reactionary doctrine of the Second Revolution. The current answer to the serious question of where China is going, an answer which occupies a ruling position in the ideological sphere, is the reactionary doctrine of the Second Revolution. People's minds are greatly confused, and they say almost unanimously the first great cultural revolution can only do so much. There is nothing we can do except wait for a second revolution. After the failing of the Great Revolution, open warlordism became the rule of the commanders-in-chief of the Kuomintang Revolutionary Army. To maintain Chiang Kai-shek's rule and prevent his demise, Chen Tzu-hui's reactionary Second Revolution came into being. The doctrine of the Second Revolution deceived the people with superficial changes of political power, declaring that imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, and feudalism had been overthrown, that China's bourgeoisie was in control of political power, that the democratic revolution was accomplished, and that there was nothing to do but wait for the socialist revolution. This reactionary trend of thought not only occupied the ruling position in thinking circles in the whole country at the time, but enjoyed considerable popularity even in the Communist Party. However, the task of China's bourgeois democratic revolution, as prescribed by the basic contradiction of Chinese society, the contradiction between imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, and feudalism on the one side, and the popular masses on the other, was not yet fulfilled. Therefore, although the apparently powerful Second Revolution prevailed for some time, the more violent and intensive development of the anti-imperialist, anti-feudal People's Revolution still remained an objective law, and that did not change according to men's wishes. Similarly, the task that has been accomplished at the end of the First Great Cultural Revolution is prescribed by the social conditions that led to the current revolution. Unless the program of the First Great Cultural Revolution laid down by these social contradictions is carried out, the First Great Cultural Revolution will not be brought to an end.
As has been said in the previous paragraphs, the basic social contradictions that gave rise to the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution are contradictions between the rule of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie and the mass of the people. The development and intensification of these contradictions decides that society needs a more thorough change, overthrow of the rule of the bureaucratic bourgeoisie through the smashing of the old state machinery, realization of social revolution, realization of the redistribution of assets and power, and establishment of a new society, People's Commune of China.
This is also the basic program and ultimate object of the First Great Cultural Revolution.
At present, are these basic contradictions of Chinese society resolved? Is the object of the First Great Cultural Revolution fulfilled? As has been said above, the form of political power is superficially changed. The old provincial party committee and the old military district command have become the Revolutionary Committee, or the preparatory group for the Revolutionary Committee. However, old bureaucrats continue to play the leading role in the new political power. The contradiction between the old provincial party committee and the old military district command on the one side and the people on the other, and the contradiction between the capitalist brothers of the 47th Army and the people remain basically unresolved. The contradiction between the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie and the mass of the people is also basically unresolved, but assumes the new form of contradiction between Lien and a new political power. The overthrow of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie, changes in the armed forces, establishment of communes, and such basic social changes which the First Great Cultural Revolution must fulfill, are not fulfilled. Of course, such redistribution of assets and power were temporarily, and in a limited way, realized during the January Revolution and the August Storm. But the fruit of victory of both the January Revolution and the August Storm have been basically usurped by the bourgeoisie. Social reforms were aborted, and social changes were not consolidated and thoroughly realized, and the end of the First Great Cultural Revolution has not been reached. The masses have said, everything remains the same after so much ado.
Since the basic social contradictions that led to the eruption of the First Great Cultural Revolution are not resolved, but are developing more and more acutely in a new form, and although an apparently powerful reactionary doctrine of Second Revolution dominates the thinking circles, and the masses are deceived with superficial changes of the form of political power, the more intensive and violent forward development of the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution is still the objective law that does not change according to the wishes of man. The usurping bourgeoisie hope to corrode the resistance of the revolutionary people with the doctrine of the Second Revolution. But those who support their rule and sinister scheme will surely go bankrupt. Just as Chen Suhui's doctrine of the Second Revolution was unable to save the life of the Qiang family dynasty, and the powerful rule of religious thought failed to stop the disintegration and collapse of the feudal economic base, the new trend of thought, the ultra-left trend of thought, is not quite yet mature, and is still very weak. But this overcoming of the apparently powerful traditional ideas and rotten mummified doctrine of Second Revolution will be the inevitable tendency of historical development. The bourgeoisie always represent the form of political power of their rule as the most perfect, flawless thing in the world that serves the whole people. The new bureaucratic bourgeoisie and the brutes of the right wing and the petty bourgeoisie who depend on them are doing exactly that. They ignore the provisional character of the Revolutionary Committee and nauseatingly praise it. Marxist-Leninists must ruthlessly expose the suppression of the revolutionary people by the Revolutionary Committee, energetically declare that the People's Commune of China is a society that we proletariat and revolutionary people must bring about in this cultural revolution, and energetically make it known that the inevitable tendency of the Revolutionary Committee is to collapse. The reactionary doctrine of Second Revolution is expressed concretely in various forms. There is the doctrine of the new stage and the doctrine of the transformation of the left, which Comrade Chen Po-ta criticized and refuted long ago. Then there is the naked doctrine of the return to the origin and the doctrine of putting an end to the show, as well as a preposterous view that the Cultural Revolution would come to an end in the third year, etc., which had prevailed for some time. Comrade Chiang's November 12th directive and Comrade Lin Piao's October 24th directive are a heavy blow to the reactionary doctrine of Second Revolution. Some people criticize us for waiting to arrive at communism in one step and immediately abolish class and the three major differences. They say that political power of the Paris Commune type, as envisaged by Chairman Mao, is a dream, and that all this is unrealistic before the realization of communism. These people deliberately distort our views. We certainly do not want to immediately do away with class, the legal rights of the bourgeoisie, and the three major differences. This is indeed impossible before the realization of communism. This can only be our highest program, not our lowest. Our lowest program calls for the overthrow of the rule of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie and narrowing of the three major differences. It is, of course, impossible to destroy the exploiting classes. After the victory of the First Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, there will inevitably be new class changes. It is these new class changes that again lead to new social reform and so push history forward. In the same way, China's bourgeois democratic revolution succeeded in overthrowing the rule of imperialism, bureaucratic capitalism, and feudalism in China, but could not destroy the possibility of the birth of new exploiters. People who criticize us in this way want to assert all our efforts will be in vain, that society cannot take a new leap, and that assets and power cannot be redistributed, but can only be changed somewhat. Forgetful gentlemen, the January Revolution and the August Storm did bring about, although only temporarily and locally, a redistribution of assets and power, and a qualitative leap in the whole society. Has that not already picked to pieces the gray liquidationist views you spread? Cadres of the proletariat have not yet politically matured, and the revolutionary people have not yet naturally produced cadres who are true proletarian authority. But all people almost unanimously condemn us, saying that we want to set aside all cadres and that we have no use for them. This is because many people still cherish illusions about the bureaucrats. People have not raised their perceptual knowledge of the January Revolution and the August Storm. They still think without the bureaucrats, society will collapse. We really believe that 90% of the senior cadres should stand aside, that at most they can be only objects to be educated and united,
This is because they already have constituted the decaying class with their own particular interests. Their relation with the people has changed from the relation between leaders and the led in the past to exploiters and exploited, to oppressors and the oppressed. Most of them consciously or unconsciously yearn for the capitalist road and protect and develop capitalist things. The rule of their class has completely blocked the development of history.
Instead of overthrowing the class, could they not be persuaded to relinquish their high salaries and other interests of bourgeois legal rights and follow the socialist road instead of the capitalist road? The proletariat have really been making efforts in that direction. Chairman Mao's repeated extensive concessions to the bourgeoisie are a concentrated expression of these efforts.
However, they, the bureaucrats, hit back at and carry out the counter-reckoning against the revolutionary people with increasing madness, pushing themselves nearer and nearer the guillotine. All this proves that no decaying class in history would voluntarily make an exit from the stage of history. In the new society of the Paris Commune type, this class will be overthrown. This will be demonstrated by iron-bound facts of the great changes of the January Revolution and the August Storm, so unexpected by mediocre people. The class of bureaucrats will be replaced by cadres with true proletarian authority, naturally produced by the revolutionary people in the struggle to overthrow this decaying class. The cadres are members of the Commune. They have no special privileges. Economically, they get the same treatment as the masses in general. They may be dismissed or changed at any time in accordance with the demands of the masses. These new authoritative cadres have not yet made their appearance. But these cadres will be spontaneously produced following the increasing maturity of the political thinking of the revolutionary people. This is an inevitable result of the political and ideological maturity of the proletariat.
9. Refutation of the leftist doctrine of one revolution. Some infantile revolutionaries of the revolutionary ranks suggest that there is no first or second cultural revolution, that the revolution should go on till communism is realized. This is the leftist doctrine of one revolution. People who have this idea are very few in number. Their shortcoming is their low political level. Chairman Mao's theory that the transitional period will be divided into different historical stages is the best enlightenment for them. The revolution is still necessary to be divided in stages. We are for continuous revolution, but also believe a revolution by stages. Advocates of the leftist one revolution doctrine have not put forward the program for the first true socialist revolution. In practice, they have lowered their task for the present stage, so that the revolutionary people may fight confidently for the targets of this stage, which they think they can fulfill. The doctrine is therefore also harmful and must be corrected. Where China goes to also determines where the world goes to. China must necessarily go toward the new society of People's Commune of China.
If dictatorship by the Revolutionary Committee is regarded as the ultimate object of the first great cultural revolution, then China will inevitably go the way of the Soviet Union, and the people may again return to the fascist, bloody rule of the capitalists. The Revolutionary Committee's road of bourgeois reformism is impracticable.
This is because the present age is the age of the great banner of the doctrine of Mao Zedong, a great age in which imperialism is going downhill towards its debacle while socialism goes uphill towards worldwide victory. The world today is one in which capitalism is definitely dying and socialism is definitely prospering. In this great revolutionary period of unprecedentedly great significance in this sweeping era, miracles, at present not yet thought of, but completely comfortable to the law of historical development, are bound to happen in the history of mankind. Victory of the Chinese proletariat and the broad masses of revolutionary people, and the extinction of the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie are likewise inevitable. The world-shaking great festival of the revolutionary people, the overthrow of the Revolutionary Committee and the birth of the People's Commune of China, will surely arrive.
The Commune of the ultra-left faction will not conceal its viewpoints and intentions. We publicly declare that our object of establishing the People's Commune of China can be established only by overthrowing the bourgeois dictatorship and revisionist system of the Revolutionary Committee with brute force. Let the new bureaucratic bourgeoisie tremble before the true socialist revolution that shakes the world. What the proletariat can lose in the revolution is only their chains. What they gain will be the whole world. The China of tomorrow will be the world of the Commune.
Long live the doctrine of Comrade Mao Zedong.